Hello world, it is a good day, and today we're not finishing a book, theoretically. Remember, a week ago, I started reading, I don't know why I'm lifting this because I have a thumbnail. Remember, like a week ago, I started reading a book, Beachhead, you may remember it. We read the first page, and we read the first chapter. Sort of commented on it as I was going through the first chapter. Well, after reading the first chapter, I didn't have a lot of hope for it, and over the last day or so, when I don't like a book, like a writing style or a story or whatever, I take my time reading it. So rather than reading it, I just sort of carry it around. I don't know if you have the same problem, but I'm just not enthused to read it. And sometimes it's so bad or it's so interesting that I'll keep pushing through it. Like Triple X Seamus was different enough that I wanted to see what turns that author would take, and I can attest that every chapter did bring a surprise, or at least most of the chapters brought a surprise, including some of the last chapters. Those were surprising. I'll leave a link to it in my blog below. I didn't do a video of it, but I did do a blog of it, and if you'd like me to talk about it, leave a comment below and let me know. But so Beachhead, in the last couple of days, I've been like, I just need to get off the pot and read this and decide what I'm going to do with it. And so I've pushed through the next 3 chapters. I only just reached chapter 5 today, the day that I'm recording this, and I don't know if I can go on. So I'm going to share with you why I didn't finish Beachhead. In case you need a refresh on what Beachhead is, it's 1980s on Florida's Gulf Coast. Sun, drugs, gambling, debts, and dirty deals push Navy prison parolee Scotland Ross deeper into the life of crime he never wanted. His sister's life, a potential newfound love, and his own freedom are all on the line as he tangles with the redneck gangsters intent on becoming the state's next governor. Will Scotland make the right choice, or the one that keeps him alive? Well, I wish I had read that before I purchased this book, instead of just trusting the dudes at the book fair who are trying to sell their books, because I likely wouldn't have got it. So what bothers me the most in this book, and I mentioned it in my first page reading, and I think I mentioned it in my first chapter reading for this book, is that the author puts too much information after literally everything. He inserts a bunch of exposition all over the place, and Chapter 5 is only on page 52. Well, in these 4 chapters, we get exposition on at least 5 or 6 characters, minimally, when they're talking and in the middle of a scene. So this is an action story, and so you want the content to keep moving forward, and you want to keep building the tension. But the way that you do that is by stopping an exchange between 2 gangsters or 2 criminals, or in a tense scene, to tell me about the background of a character. But you just keep building, and you don't answer some of the questions that you introduce at the time that you introduce them. And I will give some examples of that as I go. There's also a lot of overwriting, like unnecessary sentences, things that are there to, I'm not sure if they're there for comedic purposes or if they're there to try and give extra context, but they're really distracting. Like here, he repositioned the glass and leaned his head back. It did little to cool him down and stop his forehead or armpits from sweating. You could stop at, it did little to cool him down or stop him from sweating. We don't need to know which body parts are sweating. He tapped his toe, his whole body pulsing with the energy of the fight or flight instinct he'd learned about in physiology sophomore year of college. So, if you're actually in a moment and you're starting to feel nervous, most people don't go, oh crap, this is my fight or flight instincts going on. I remember when I learned about this in high school or college. You know, I had that one teacher. People don't do that. And when you start going off in rabbit trails like this, it actually withdraws the person from the character. This is just trying to slip in backstory because, oh look, now we know that he had a physiology class in college, so he went to college at some point. And it's a cheap way to insert information, and it slows down the story, and it breaks the narrative, and it doesn't seem natural. There'd be nothing to miss when he left, including the stupid fucking cactus and the coffee can on the windowsill. I'm pretty sure in the first chapter that I read, no, I'm 100% sure in the first chapter I read, he mentions that cactus one time, maybe 2 or 3 times, because that cactus was there on the windowsill when he moved in, and it's in a coffee can, and I know he described it, he like stared at it in the middle of a conversation, and it's brought up a couple more times. Jesus Christ, he said, looking at the cactus on the windowsill. The cactus itself stood 1/2 foot tall, stuck in the dirt inside. That's on page 23, where we've already been introduced to this cactus like 4 or 5 times. Why is he following a character tag and dialogue tag, breaking up a dialogue scene, which is adds speed when you're doing dialogue back and forth. It adds momentum. It increases tension if the characters are fighting. In this case, they are. And it's breaking that up to tell us the description of the cactus, which we've already been told before. Why? It doesn't make any sense. And the only thing I can come up with in reading this is that the author doesn't feel comfortable doing dialogue back and forth. And so he puts in a bunch of extra actions or extra observations or anything that he can to break up those dialogue tags, and I don't think it helps. Oh, I hate this sentence. Concern bubbled like battery acid in his throat. That's unnecessary. That's overwriting. How does battery acid relate to this character? He's not a mechanic. How can you... One of the things that I see a lot happen with similes is people will use any kind of simile that they can think of, and it's usually just from the writer. So the writer will go, oh, bubbling like battery acid. Battery acid stings. But it's not really, the simile doesn't work with where the character's background is. So this character has spent time in the Navy, and then he was in Navy jail. So he'd have a couple different similes or a different background that he would bring when he's thinking of things that suck. And I'm sure there are plenty of things in prison that could bubble and be acidic and painful that are not relating to battery acid. I don't know where battery acid came from, and it pulls me out of the story because it's not related to Scotland. It doesn't feel like his voice, and it does this a couple of times. So at this point, in the first chapter, Scotland's house was broken into by some gangster that he played cards with and owed money. He got punched in the eye when he was struggling, and so the rest of this picks up from there. In chapter 2, his sister comes for a visit. I think at the end of chapter 1, there was like a knock on his door, and it was his sister. And so his sister has come in because she wants something from him. Why Daytona? The question stunned him like a punch in the ear. That is the most bizarre simile, and I don't really get it. There's one later on, too. The number seemed to punch Scotland in the sternum. I don't know why this author chose to make answers or words like punches or like any sort of assault. The similes don't make sense to me when I'm reading. And also, just the idea that the question stunned him. I'm not sure that it's justified for him to feel like he's been punched in the ear. And I'm not really sure what that means. Hi, how are you? Oh, I feel like crap. Oh, that answer makes me feel like you just punched me in the ear. What does that mean? One thing I do when I'm reading is I take note of every character in the scene, and I take note of how they entered, and I try to figure out what they've wanted in the scene. This is something that I continue to use when I'm reading or when I'm writing. So when I was reading this, his sister comes in, and she obviously wants something. It's monetary, which you can guess, but it seems like it gets lost in their conversation. I'm going to skip all of the actions through here just so you can get the dialogue back and forth. That's something that I like to do when I'm editing to make sure that the dialogue actually makes sense going back and forth. Because I'm the only person in the world who knows you, Scotland. Why would you want to give that up after everything we've been through? I don't get to see you or the girls, so I was going to start my own life, get a family of my own. Do it right this time. You can do that here. We need you. You okay? You should put some ice on that eye. It hurt? It's almost gone. Job-related injury? Enough about me. What's the problem? Things are all fucked up right now. How fucked up? I'm okay. You're on your way to Daytona. You don't need to hear that bullshit. So, we're on page 20 and page 21. At the top of page 20, we obviously see that she is trying to manipulate Scotland with, well, why don't you stay? You've got a life here. Don't you care about me? But then on page 2, after she's got his attention, because she's pulled him into the trap, she goes, oh no, never mind. Just go and do your thing. And this doesn't make any sense to me from an objective route because she's already got him pulled in and asking questions. At the top of 21, when she goes, "You're on your way to Daytona. You don't need to hear my bullshit." At the very bottom of the same page, she goes, "All right, I get it. You're not going to help us." Dude. At the bottom of the left page, he said how fucked up, and you wouldn't tell him, and now you're getting mad at him for not helping you. You wouldn't tell him. So they're arguing, whatever, and then it breaks into this masterpiece. She looked 6 years old when she cried, always had. When they were kids, he used to be able to make her stop crying by pretending to be a dog chasing his tail or another standby, which he did for her now. He lifted his leg, pulled his ass cheek, and forced out a fart that squeaked like a rusty gate. The laugh he added for effect was of no use either. "Come on." "God damn it, Scotland." She stood and pointed at him. "You have no idea how difficult it is for me to ask my little brother for money. It reminds me too much of Daddy. You ever thought of that, ass face?" Her eyes softened around the edges. "I've never thought about it before right now, but it's true. The only difference is that Mark's still around and he's been so bad to you." One, I don't believe for a second that you've never thought of this before. If you haven't thought of this before, this is really ridiculous. If she feels bad, because she's saying, "I feel bad for asking you for money," well, then she's felt bad asking him for money before, which tells me she must have thought about how bad she feels asking him for money before, and considered why she feels bad for that. "Without the house, me and the girls would be left to live in our car or under a bridge." There were women and child shelters in the 1980s. And we're just a couple pages in and he's still going, "And you're just going to fucking leave me," Dana said. "I never thought you'd care so much." "Why can't you just finish college?" "Don't start that." Of all the violence he had the potential for, none was more severe than the shit he beat himself up about. "You were so close." "Let it go, Dana." "Babies die in their sleep sometimes. Your studying had nothing to do with it." "We're done talking about this." The image of his lifeless baby burned as bright in his mind as a nightly dream. While you're trying to get somebody to stay in town with you because they're thinking of leaving and disconnecting with you completely, I think one of the worst things you can do is maybe bring up something that is traumatic. Push buttons when they say stop it. So I have lost the plot in what Dana is trying to do it all, because she's obviously not trying to get money. She's obviously not trying to manipulate him into loving her or staying again, and the scene just feels like it is being used for exposition. Their conversation is being used for exposition. They're arguing so that they can share background information on each other. There is a whole 2 pages about, like, her husband, maybe more than 2 pages about her husband. "Why don't you just get government money? Those kids don't deserve to see 2 parents destroyed." I don't really understand this sentence, so if somebody can explain it to me, if it makes any more sense to them. She would rather have her kids and herself live in a car or under a bridge than accept government funds because she needs help. And she also thinks that taking government funds would destroy her family. One of the final things this chapter says is, "Leaving now, though, would sever the last thread of family he had left in the world. He was so close to getting out clean, but she had a rope tied around his waist, anchoring him there. If he had left," it mentions it multiple times in this chapter, "if he had left before she had gotten there at 10 o'clock, then none of this would have happened. He still would have severed the last tie to his family that he had, and he wasn't concerned about it until this moment, because he didn't consider that if he just went to Daytona and didn't tell his family that he was going, that it was severing ties. I don't know. It doesn't really connect, and it just seems like it's not fully justified, but it was written this way because this character had to stay in Daytona so that the rest of the plot could work. It doesn't seem like it's really thought through or committed to by Scotland. In chapter 3, we start with Kinsey, and it starts out with just some exposition of him talking about being on the phone and being in his office. He's talking to his daughter, which he talks to for 5 minutes every night when he's not at home. And then he finishes off with talking to his wife, who is kind of like I can't wait to get off the phone from her. Like, she's attractive and she's exactly what I need because I want to be a governor someday. And she's good at smiling, but I don't want to talk to her. Kinsey put his hands on his hips, but the posture didn't suit him. So at this particular moment, he just threw everything off of his desk. So I don't understand somebody going into a completely unnatural pose that's very open when they're angry. He would pick something more natural that's more closed off when he's angry, especially when you just cleared the desk, right? Scotland spun his Zippo and figure 8 pattern in his pocket. He'd gotten so adept with it that he could open and close it without making a sound, could strike the flint wheel with just enough force to ignite. The warmth of the flame between his hand and thigh only lasted a second or two. He always closed the lid, nothing harmful, nothing sexual either. Why was sexual brought up? Nothing harmful, end it. But then the next couple of sentences are about how there's nothing sexual about the flame. I would not have assumed there was anything sexual about the flame. I would have assumed it was a fidgeting habit, possibly for when you're nervous. But now I'm thinking that it is sexual because you brought it up being sexual. It was creepy the way mannequins are creepy. Great descriptions there. The next couple of pages, I think, are we in chapter 4? Yeah, we're in chapter 4. Now Scotland and Kinsey are talking. Kinsey is giving Scotland some objectives to go and steal some things. But while they're in the office, this is shady business, number 1. Number 2, this guy eventually wants to run for governor. Number 3, this guy thinks that Scottish is stupid. However, the last 4 or 5 pages of this chapter, while he's talking to Scottish, he uses that time to also give Scottish a bunch of information about what he's doing, why he wants him to break into a real estate firm and steal papers, and how much he's going to pay him, and that it depends on how much those papers are worth and what he's actually trying to do. And here is my board behind me that has the state in it with little pinpoints of that are color-coded based on what I want to do or if I own that property or not, and here's what all of this means. So he's telling somebody who could turn on him at any time, who he thinks is stupid, all about his plan. Now this is obviously just a way for the author to tell the readers about what the bad guy is doing, but it's not necessary, and it actually breaks up the tension. This scene between Kinsey and Scotland could be so tense if Kinsey was just like, go and do this thing for me, and Scotland's like, why? Why do you want me to break into this place? It's none of your business, just go do it. You want to get paid? You're gonna get out from under my finger? Go do it. Stop asking questions. He could be so much more cutthroat. Not only does this break the tension, but this waters down Kinsey as a bad guy. And I just... Okay, the last thing I'm going to mention, this just makes it worse. So, Kinsey owes this guy. This guy went to his house, beat the crap out of him, could obviously kill him if he wanted to. And he said, you're going to do this stuff, and you're going to be indebted to me, and you're going to do these jobs to pay off your debt, and once your debts are paid, then you can keep the money. But Scotland stayed because he wants to give money to his sister, because his sister does not have an income, since her husband can't go catch fish from a fish ban. So he agrees to go and do the job, but he also says that he wants half of the money made from the job that he completes. He doesn't say, he demands it. And Kinsey goes, ha 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 ha, no. Kinsey says, I have ways of making you stay. And Scotland says, then I'll have no choice but to work half as hard. And Kinsey says, that's a very good, Scottish. You're a quick wit. I got a tickle in my gizzards that will tell me you have potential. I've got a tickle in my gizzards that tells me that you have potential. So I'm going to honor the half and half payment plan. That reeks of desperation. He literally just said, no, you're going to do what I say because I have ways of making you do what I say. And then immediately he just bolts, okay. There's no reason for it. It just, the author decided this is what needs to happen. One of the most important things for me in a book is that the characters make sense, the motivations make sense, their interactions make sense. But so far, the design of this book feels more like because the author says so, that's why. That is my, I guess, critique on Beachhead. If you would like to read it yourself, there's a link in the description below. If there is any book that you would like me to read, feel free to leave a comment. If you've enjoyed this kind of content, I urge you to like and subscribe for more, and I will see you next time. Bye!